He offered me $5,000 in a parking lot to bench his kid, and he honestly thought I'd say yes. That's when I knew I was in something way deeper than baseball. That was the moment it stopped being about wins and losses, and started being about something a whole lot darker: influence, intimidation, and the ugly power of a last name. It started like any normal spring in Buffalo: snow melting, fields muddy, and the kids itching to get back on the diamond. I've coached youth baseball for over 20 years now, mostly for love, not for money. I run the Ironwood Colts, a travel team for 13-year-olds who live and breathe the game. We're not fancy. We don't have matching duffels or private trainers. But we work hard, and we play fair. And if I've done my job right, these boys leave the team not just better players, but better young men. That was always the goal. My name's Daniel Price. Not that Daniel Price, as I have to say more often now than I used to. I'm 53, Buffalo born and bred. I work a regular 9 to 5 for the city, Parks Department maintenance. Baseball's what I do after hours, weekends, summers. My wife Karen passed 5 years ago. My son Mikey, he's 17 now. Plays high school ball. Switch hitter. Line drive machine. Good head on his shoulders. Coaching helped me keep going after we lost her. It gave me purpose. Something solid to hold onto when everything else felt like it was drifting. This year's Colts roster was one of our strongest in a decade. Gritty kids. Hardworking families. But that was before Preston Langley joined the team. You know the type. Kid shows up with a $100 glove and no clue how to use it. Designer cleats. Personalized bat. Dad's got the Range Rover idling in the lot. His swing is all arms and no timing, and he blames the tee when he whiffs. But it wasn't the kid's fault, not really. Preston was just 12 years old and trying to live up to his last name. It was his father, Clay Langley, who caused the storm. We held open tryouts in February, like always. I'd never heard of Preston Langley before then. Didn't need to. He made it obvious who he was from the moment he strutted onto the turf at the rec center, Clay trailing behind him in Italian loafers like he was scouting for the Yankees. "That's my boy," Clay said loudly to one of the other dads. Traveled with a private coach all last fall. Hit .480 in the Elite Fall League. Probably the best bat here. I watched as Preston took a few hacks in the cage. His swing was fast but sloppy, no lower body involvement. Not terrible, but not special either. He muffed a couple of grounders during infield drills and didn't hustle for pop flies. Honestly, I wouldn't have called him back for a second look. But one of my assistant coaches, Mark, pulled me aside. "You might want to look up his last name," Mark muttered, nodding toward Clay. I did. And there it was, Langley Development. Clay Langley, President and CEO. Big real estate fish. Donated 6 figures to the local high school's new turf field. Hosted the mayor's re-election fundraiser. That kind of name. I didn't want to play politics. But the league had asked us to be more inclusive. And I knew that word didn't always mean what it sounded like. So I took a deep breath and slotted Preston in as our 12th man. He'll get chances, I told myself. Maybe he'll surprise me. He didn't. 3 weeks into practice, Preston still couldn't track a fly ball or put together 2 decent at-bats. He whined when I asked him to run drills twice. Rolled his eyes when I corrected his footwork. Worse, he sulked when he wasn't in the starting lineup. Clay wasn't much better. He stood behind the backstop every practice in a quarter-zip pullover, arms crossed, barking passive-aggressive advice like he was mic'd up for a sports docuseries. "Gotta let the kid see more pitches, coach. If he had better hitters around him, he'd get better pitches. Seems like there's a little favoritism in that batting order." It got old fast. I kept it professional. I always do. But then came the West Lake tournament. It was our first travel weekend of the season. Sunny day, warm breeze, full stands. We were up 3-2 in the fourth inning, tight game. I had Preston on the bench, like I had most games. He hadn't earned a start. But we were rotating kids in, and I planned to give him an inning in right field. Before I made the switch, he came to me and said, "My dad says I should be starting shortstop." I looked at him, startled. "You're not a shortstop, Preston." He says I was better than Carter all last year. Carter was our actual shortstop. Solid glove, good instincts, quiet kid. The idea that Preston could outplay him was laughable. And then Preston's voice dropped a little. "If I don't play more, he's gonna pull me. He says it's a waste of time." I paused. There it was, not arrogance. Pressure. The kid wasn't trying to be difficult. He was scared. I said calmly, "Tell your dad this isn't a country club. You earn your spot here." He gave a tight nod and walked back to the bench, shoulders slumped. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. After the game, we won, by the way, without Preston playing a single inning. I was packing up my gear when I noticed Clay waiting by my car. He was wearing mirrored sunglasses and that same smug smile he always wore when the team parents gathered. "Coach Price," he said, walking over. "Got a minute?" I nodded, cautious. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small white envelope. "I know these teams run on tight budgets," he said. "I want to make a donation. For the team. Or, unofficially, maybe just to say thanks for giving my son some extra opportunity." I stared at the envelope. Didn't touch it. "What kind of opportunity?" His smile widened. "Let's just say I'd feel a lot better if Preston got some regular starting time. Shortstop. Maybe bat cleanup now and then. Not every game, of course. Just enough to be seen. I know how these things work. Exposure matters at this level." I felt my stomach turn. "You're offering me money to play your son more." He shrugged. "I'm offering support. And I think we both know the league doesn't exactly pay its coaches. You deserve something extra." I finally opened the envelope. 5 crisp $100 bills. $5,000, he said. A gesture. No strings, no paperwork. Just mutual understanding. I took a long breath and handed it back. "Mr. Langley, I don't know what world you're used to, but in mine, we don't buy spots for kids. And we definitely don't teach them that talent can be faked with a checkbook." His smile faltered for the first time. "Think about it," he said, voice low. "You walk away now, you're not just turning down money. You're turning down protection." I let the words hang in the air. Then I reached into my passenger seat and picked up my phone. Tapped the screen twice. Showed it to him. It had been recording since he walked up. He blinked. "You recorded this?" "Sure did." He turned on his heel and stormed off. That night, I sat in my kitchen, staring at the ceiling. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to break wide open. And I was right. The next morning, I got an email from the league board. Clay Langley had filed a formal complaint against me. Allegations of unfair treatment, targeted benching, and inappropriate conduct toward a minor. Langley wasn't just trying to get me off the team. He was trying to erase my name from the game entirely. And he had the money and influence to do it. This wasn't baseball anymore. This was war. I didn't show up to the board meeting where they reviewed Langley's complaint, but I heard all about it the next day from Mark. The board met in the back room of the Civic Center where we usually held our annual parent meeting. Clay arrived early with his suit jacket slung over one shoulder, shaking hands like he was hosting a gala. He brought a manila folder filled with printed emails, typed notes, even screenshots of text messages. Mark said it looked more like a merger proposal than a complaint. He smiled the whole time, made a joke about being a reluctant advocate for his son, and slipped in phrases like competitive integrity and toxicity among leadership. According to Mark, not a single person pushed back. Half the room had real estate ties, and the other half wanted to. It was surreal hearing how easily they'd swallowed it. Apparently, he even implied, without ever saying it, that I had acted out of emotional instability. That one stung worse than I expected. It was subtle, but loaded. I'm a quiet guy. I keep to myself. My wife died 5 years ago. My world shrank after that. You don't get loud after a loss like that, you just get quieter. But in rooms like that, silence turns into suspicion. The board issued a formal warning. They said I'd be under review for the next 60 days. They strongly encouraged a leave of absence. A soft exile, framed as a break for wellness. I read the email twice, forwarded it to myself, then deleted the original. I didn't write back. Didn't argue. Didn't call Mark. I just stopped showing up. Let him step in as interim coach. Told the boys I had some health stuff to handle. That part wasn't entirely untrue. There's a kind of stress that lives behind your ribs when your name gets dragged through the dirt and no one stops it. It hollows you out. But I didn't explain that to anyone. I just let the silence spread. From the outside, it looked like I'd folded. Some of the parents probably figured it was time anyway. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this age group anymore. Maybe I'd gotten tired. Langley took full advantage. Within 2 weeks, he donated a pitching machine to the league, paid for new dugout benches at Walker Field, and been named executive advisor to the district expansion committee. He hosted a team cookout at his lake house. Photos from that day made the league's newsletter header. Clay was everywhere, shaking hands, clapping backs, giving speeches. Meanwhile, Preston started every game at shortstop and batted cleanup. Never mind the botched double plays or the 3-strike innings. Clay had rewritten the scorecard by sheer force of will. I couldn't decide whether it was ambition or delusion. Probably both. I didn't go to the games, but I watched the replays when no one else was awake. Usually around midnight, sitting in the dark with a mug of cold coffee, laptop open, watching the kids I'd trained look like they were sleepwalking. The dugout was quiet. Body language stiff. I could see it in Carter especially, moved from short to second, standing a little apart from the group, always glancing over his shoulder like he wasn't sure if he belonged there anymore. During one game, Preston flubbed a routine grounder, costing them 3 runs. Carter didn't say a word, just turned and walked back to the dugout like he was carrying all the blame. That silence, it hurt more than anything else. Not the mistakes. The way the boys had been taught not to speak up. That wasn't just bad baseball. That was something worse. That night I closed my laptop and just sat at the kitchen table. Mikey came downstairs for water and saw me like that. He stood there for a moment before speaking. "You miss it?" I nodded. He leaned on the counter. "They miss you out there." I gave a small smile. "It's not about being missed," I said. "It's about what comes next." He tilted his head like he wanted to say more, but he just grabbed his glass and left it at that. I appreciated that. Mikey's always been good at letting silence work when it needs to. I started waking up earlier. Only half an hour, but enough to make the mornings mine again. I stopped wasting time scrolling headlines. Instead, I read league codes, parent conduct clauses, coach dismissal procedures. I printed out the entire bylaws document and marked it up like I was cramming for a final exam. I highlighted everything that had been twisted against me and everything that Langley was exploiting. I wasn't planning revenge, not exactly. But I was preparing. I needed to understand the battlefield before I stepped back on it. I called in some vacation time at work and spent a couple afternoons walking the loop at Delaware Park with a thermos of strong coffee and a legal pad. I wrote down everything I remembered from the season so far. Every conversation with Clay. Every line he tried to slip in casually at practice. What he said the day he handed me that envelope. I wasn't dramatic about it. Just methodical. If I learned anything from baseball, it's that discipline is what turns raw skill into something dangerous. One day I drove across town to watch a youth game on a public field. No one knew me there. I stood near the outfield fence and watched two teams of 11-year-olds play like it mattered. Hustling. Cheering. Playing loose and loud. A couple of parents from my league were there too, clearly checking out another program. I didn't approach them. Just noted who they were and what that meant. Back home, I dug out the old weight bench in the garage. Started jogging again, just a couple miles around the neighborhood. It wasn't about appearances. I wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. But I needed to rebuild something tangible. Even if it was just my stamina. Something to remind me I wasn't stuck. A few days later, I ran into Carter's dad at the grocery store. He looked older than I remembered. Not in the face, but in the way he held himself. Just tired. His cart held milk, bread, and a cheap six-pack. When he saw me, he hesitated like he wasn't sure if he should wave or walk away. Then he approached and shook my hand. "My boy misses you," he said. "He's quiet about it, but I can tell." "How's he holding up?" He sighed, eyes tired. "Not great. Says practice feels weird. Says nobody talks anymore." I nodded. "Tell him I'm proud of how he's handling it." He gave a sad smile and looked around like he didn't want to be overheard. "Some of us have been talking. Other parents. Not a lot yet, but enough. Everyone's walking on eggshells. It's not sitting right." I didn't say much, just nodded. But that conversation stayed with me all the way home. Not because it meant I had allies, I didn't, not yet, but because it meant I wasn't the only one who saw it. There were others watching. Quietly. That mattered. Later that week, I got a letter from the league. It was thick with bureaucracy, paragraphs about fairness and process and interim evaluations, but the heart of it was clear: they were slow-walking the complaint. Delaying. Dragging it out until the season was over and it wouldn't matter anymore. By then, they assumed I'd either fade out or give up. Either way, I'd be gone without them having to fire me. I put the letter into a folder labeled Langley. In that folder were notes from my meetings, Clay's donation press releases, the league code with marked violations, and the audio file from the parking lot, still saved, still untouched. I wasn't ready to use it. But I knew exactly what it was worth. That Friday, Mikey and I went to the batting cages. First time in a long time. We didn't talk much. Just hit. I fed him soft toss while he cracked line drives off the back netting, the way he always had, smooth, focused, clean. That rhythm centered me. It reminded me why I coached. Not for trophies. For that feeling. For the work of it. After his last swing, he leaned on the cage and asked, "You're not done, are you?" I wiped my hands and looked at him. Not even close. Then I added, without looking up, "Let them enjoy it while it lasts." He didn't ask what I meant. He didn't have to. The first strange ripple came in the form of a quiet, unsigned email with no subject line. It just read, "Langley's been promising elite spots to parents who donate. He's not subtle about it anymore." No name. No follow-up. I read it 3 times, forwarded it to my private inbox, and deleted the original. It didn't surprise me, but it did confirm something I'd suspected: Clay wasn't content with control. He was selling futures now. Using the illusion of opportunity to string along any parent too scared their kid might fall behind. And someone out there didn't like it. A few days later, Chris, my former assistant coach, called out of the blue and asked to meet. We sat in a corner booth of a diner I used to frequent before everything turned inside out. He looked tired but tense, like someone who'd been holding a poker face too long. He's hijacked the whole staff, he said, pushing a sugar packet around on the table. Every lineup. Every substitution. He's got spreadsheets now. Rankings. I thought he was organized at first, but now it's like, he thinks he's running a pro team. I let the silence stretch before I spoke. And you just now realized it's a problem? He looked away, ashamed. I was waiting it out. Thought maybe once the season settled, it'd balance out. But it's getting worse. He talks about the team like it's his asset. Like we're just employees. The boys feel it. They won't say it out loud, but they're playing with their shoulders up. I leaned back in the booth and looked at him for a long moment. So why tell me? Chris didn't hesitate. Because I think you're doing something. And I want in. Not to get back on staff. Just, to fix it. I didn't give him an answer, just slid a napkin toward him and said, write down what you've seen. Anything specific. Practices, conversations. Times, dates. Don't embellish. Later that night, I created a new folder on my hard drive, statements. And I started filling it. The next crack came from Mikey. One evening after dinner, he noticed a folder sitting on the kitchen counter and picked it up. I'd left it there by accident, half full of screenshots and printed emails. Langley, he asked, reading the label. What's all this? I reached for it, gently pulling it from his hands. Just some notes. Background stuff. He looked at me like he wasn't 12 anymore. You're building a case. I paused, caught in that strange space between protecting him and respecting him. I'm just making sure that when this comes to light, no one can call it a grudge. He didn't nod, didn't push. But before he walked out of the room, he said, be careful. Guys like him, when they start to feel cornered, they swing harder. That stuck with me more than it should have. Mikey's always been perceptive, but there was something in his voice that night, protective, almost paternal. Like he could see what this was costing me, even if I hadn't admitted it yet. Not long after that, I noticed Langley's development company had quietly updated its website. The page showcasing youth sponsorships, photos of smiling kids in Colts uniforms, quotes about community investment, was gone. Scrubbed clean. No announcement. I double-checked the cached version and took screenshots. Then I pulled the league's donation report again. What had been listed as a $12,000 equipment donation the month prior was now marked down to $6,500 and marked, pending. That kind of inconsistency doesn't happen by accident. The real break came when I got a voicemail from Teresa, the league's treasurer. Not someone I knew well, but always polite in meetings. Her message was short, Daniel, I've found some inconsistencies in Clay Langley's donation filings. I'd like to talk. Off the record. We met at a cafe near the university, small enough to avoid familiar eyes. She came with a folder and an expression that told me she'd been sitting with discomfort for weeks. She didn't waste time. He reported donating $12,000 to the league. But the check we deposited was for $4,500. The rest was supposedly in-kind equipment. But I reviewed our inventory, it doesn't add up. Some of it never arrived. Some wasn't even new. I didn't show how fast my heart was pounding. Do you think the board knows? She gave a slow, uncertain shake of her head. Some might. Or they're choosing not to ask questions. I didn't share everything I had. But I leaned in slightly and said, there's more. And if you keep looking, quietly, "you'll find it. But when the time comes, I'm going to need someone in that room who's not afraid of him." Teresa didn't speak for a moment. Then she said something that made my breath catch. "My daughter's on the 10U team. She asked me last week if she needed to impress the rich dads to make next year's roster." That's when I knew. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about the league. About the message we were sending these kids. As Clay grew bolder, his mask began to slip. He gave a speech after a mid-season win that sounded more like a TED Talk than a post-game huddle. He talked about elevating regional impact, about franchise model pipelines, and leveraging brand identity. One parent clapped. The rest exchanged glances. Carter's dad later told me that several kids skipped optional practice the following week. Their quiet way of saying, "Enough." I kept gathering. I reached out to a lawyer who specialized in nonprofit youth athletics. Laid out a hypothetical involving hush money, slander, zoning filings, and misrepresented sponsorships. He didn't blink. "If you've got documents, timestamps, anything connecting those promises to material benefit, or misuse of a 501(c)(3), that's actionable. Especially if a board member knew and didn't intervene." I met again with Chris and handed him a discreet audio recorder. Asked him to leave it on during Clay's next team meeting. He didn't hesitate. A week later, I had a clean, uninterrupted recording of Clay saying, "We control the narrative. Parents want results, not process. If someone complains, we call it progress. No one wants to be the voice that slows things down." I replayed that line 3 times. Then I clipped it, labeled it, and backed it up in 3 locations. It wasn't just arrogance, it was a philosophy. A strategy. And it was going to hang him. Meanwhile, Mikey started noticing things. He told me a car had idled outside our house for 15 minutes one night. Same sedan passed by twice the next afternoon. Probably nothing. Maybe paranoia. But it kept me up. By the time the district tournament came around, Clay was peacocking. Custom Colts jacket. Embroidered polo. Talking to parents like he was already running the league. He teased private scouts and elite invitations. None of it was real. But that's the thing about power, it doesn't have to be real if people believe in it. Mark spotted me behind the bleachers during that last game. He walked up without fanfare and asked, "You about to drop the hammer?" "Almost," I said. "They need to see it first. The full picture. Then we can burn it down properly." He nodded and looked toward the field. "Just say the word." Across the way, Clay stood near the dugout laughing loudly with a few board members, microphone in hand. I knew what he was about to do before he did it. He stepped out near the plate and tapped the mic. "Big changes coming to this league," he boomed, smiling like he'd already won. "We're building something elite. Something lasting." And right then, as parents politely clapped and kids awkwardly shuffled, I opened the Notes app on my phone and checked off the last box on my list, public announcement, hubris documented. He had no idea the avalanche was already moving. Clay Langley stood at the podium during the league's spring banquet like a man convinced the crown was already on his head. Flanked by 2 board members in fresh Colts polos with a rebranded logo that hadn't been voted on, just quietly stitched in, I watched him from a back table. I sat next to Mikey and Chris, my arms folded tight, waiting. Clay's voice was full of the same smooth bravado that had worked for him for years. "This season isn't just the beginning of a new chapter," he said, smiling wide. "It's a redefinition of who we are as a league. A transformation toward elite opportunity, for our kids and for our city." He was still talking when the district league president, Janine Harper, a quiet force of a woman, stood up and gently raised her hand. Clay glanced at her, startled by the interruption. "If I may," she said. "Before we wrap tonight, the league has prepared a short message for transparency. In the spirit of growth. She turned toward me and nodded once. That was my cue. I rose, walked steadily to the AV table at the side of the banquet hall, and slid a flash drive into the laptop. As I queued up the file, my hand didn't shake. Not once. The room fell silent. The audio started innocently enough, just some ambient noise. Then Clay's voice rang out over the speakers, crisp and unfiltered. We control the narrative. Parents want results, not process. If someone complains, we call it progress. No one wants to be the voice that slows things down. A few nervous chuckles. But the room shifted. People leaned in. Then came the second clip, the one I'd held back until now. It was quieter, more intimate, but unmistakable. His voice again, low and confident. Look, Daniel. Let's not make this messy. You take a step back, maybe take a little vacation. I'll make sure your son's scholarship fund gets a nice boost. There's no need to drag this out. You've done good work. Just, let it transition. Gasps rippled across the room. One mother near the front turned and whispered to her husband, whose jaw clenched so hard his face reddened. Someone in the back said, "No way," under their breath. I didn't look at Clay yet. I was watching the crowd, watching realization dawn on every face. Watching the discomfort turn to betrayal. Janine turned toward Clay calmly. "Mr. Langley, is that your voice on the recording?" Clay tried to laugh. "This is clearly out of context." "Is it your voice?" she repeated, firmer now. He hesitated. "It sounds like, look, this is political. This is a smear job." Someone, Carter's dad, I think, stood up from his table. "You told me my son would never make travel team unless we got serious. You looked me in the eye when you said that." Another voice joined from the far side. "You told us the kids were being scouted. That wasn't real?" Clay's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Just a thin smile that couldn't hold its shape. Teresa stepped forward from the side of the room holding a folder of her own. Calm, composed. Her voice didn't waver. "For the board's attention, this folder contains documents showing inconsistencies in Mr. Langley's donation records, including inflated equipment reports and zoning applications submitted under the Colt's name without authorization. The city has already opened a preliminary inquiry." That was when the room fully turned. Clay looked toward one of the board members, but the man simply removed his name tag and placed it on the table. Another followed. Still, Clay made one last attempt to salvage something. "This is absurd," he snapped, voice rising. "I've invested in this league. I've brought opportunity. I've raised its profile. You're going to burn that down because a disgruntled ex-coach cobbled together a few out-of-context clips?" Janine looked at him coolly. "You're to step down from all league involvement effective immediately pending formal investigation. If you refuse, we'll escalate this to district arbitration." Clay froze. He looked like he might fight it, but then something in his posture cracked. He turned, stepped down from the stage, and exited through the side door without another word. Not a soul followed him. I stayed seated. Not triumphant. Just steady. Mikey leaned toward me and said quietly, "That's it?" I nodded once. "He's done." The league fallout took weeks. Board members resigned. A third-party audit was launched. The zoning permits Clay had filed were flagged, and the community center project he used as leverage was officially killed. His development firm's name stopped appearing on banners and websites. There were no lawsuits. Clay wasn't that foolish, but there were letters from attorneys trying to clarify misunderstandings. None of them stuck. But honestly, what mattered most came after. A week later, I got a simple message from the interim board chair: "Would you consider returning for spring training?" I didn't ask for a title. I didn't ask for credit. I just said yes. At the first practice back, the field felt like it had taken a breath. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean. The boys trickled in. Carter arrived early, walked right up to me, and said, "So, we're allowed to joke in the dugout again?" I smiled and said, "Yeah. Dugout jokes are officially back." Chris was there too, along with 2 new assistant coaches, parents who hadn't had the courage before, but now stepped up without hesitation. Mikey came by after school, helping shag balls and toss warm-up grounders. I didn't ask him to. He just showed up. Halfway through practice, I noticed Teresa and Janine standing at the fence. They didn't interrupt. Just watched. Observed. I nodded to them. They nodded back. After the drills wrapped, I sat on the dugout bench as the sun dropped low behind the bleachers. Mikey dropped down beside me. We didn't speak for a minute. Then he said, "You know, if this had gone the other way, if you'd just stepped down." I finished for him. He would have kept going. To other teams. Other kids. He nodded. He really thought he could buy whatever he wanted. I looked out at the field. He didn't just try to buy your future. He tried to own it. Mikey picked up a stray baseball and rolled it between his hands. "But you didn't let him." "No," I said. "And neither did you." He gave me a crooked smile, then stood and jogged out to join a few of the kids still hanging around. I watched him for a long time, my son, taller now, sharper around the edges, but still the same kid who once fell asleep in the back of the van with a mitt on his hand. Before I packed up, I walked into the storage shed behind the field. In the corner sat the dusty, cracked Colts banner from the season Clay first arrived. The one he insisted we replace with something modern. I rolled it up and carried it out with me, locking the gate behind. That night, I slid the folder labeled Langley into a filing drawer. Locked it. Didn't toss it. Just sealed it away. I don't believe in revenge for the sake of it. But I do believe in accountability. And sometimes the only way to protect what's good is to drag what's rotten into the light. Clay thought he was building something permanent. All he did was burn his own reputation to the ground. He thought he could bury me under influence and money. All he really did was plant me deeper. And I grew back stronger.